Oh, the start's always weird, isn't it? Hey, look, Xav here. I wanted to jump on and do a bit of a recap on where we're at. Look, 10 episodes in. Well, filmed 11, but we've released 10. Um, and just wanted to talk about what I've learnt, uh, what's been hard, what's been really fun, and where we're going. Um, it's definitely the podcast has been definitely something that I haven't been comfortable with sort of doing. It's definitely outside of my wheelhouse, but I feel like it's important, and I really wanted to. Yeah, I really wanted to. I felt like I had to do it, and why I started the podcast was, put simply, I'm sick of hearing all this negativity about construction. And I don't think that there's enough people out there talking positively about construction, like especially in Canberra. I mean, there's some podcasts in Sydney, there's some podcasts in Melbourne, there's some podcasts in Brisbane. I'm sure there's some over in Western Australia as well, but no one was sort of really talking about construction in the ACT in this type of format. And I felt like it needed to be done. So just going off the rally and then got some good interest there. I felt like when I started it, this could be something positive that I could do, because I didn't want to sit back and just, that TikTok inspector that came to Canberra and just rinsed Canberra builders, that really frustrated me. I I was pretty fired up after that, and yeah, I wanted to do something about it. I didn't want to just sit back and complain. I know that in Canberra we've got some really good builders. We've got a really strong construction industry here, and we have amazing trades people that work here. We have a really awesome construction sector. We've got some phenomenal designers here as well, architects and draftspeople. And I really, yeah, where it came to was, well, how do I put some positivity back into construction? And my best thought there was, well, let's just do a podcast and talk to people that are absolute guns at what they do. So that's why I started it, and I've really been enjoying it, to be honest. Talking to different people and highlighting their skills, and talking to experts in all different sorts of all different parts of the construction industry has been extremely interesting. And thank you to everyone that's been listening. Thank you to everyone that's jumped on early and supported the podcast. Look, I could do a million shout outs. But the first sort of people that I need to thank the most are the people that have already come in and done a podcast. Sean Hardwick from Hardwick Projects, mate, thank you for all the support you've given me. I spoke to Sean on the phone the other day about the podcast and where it was at, and that I was enjoying it. And he was definitely the one that sort of said to me, mate, you should have a crack at this, and I think you'd be really good at it. And he sort of gave me the confidence to actually have a go at it. So Sean, thank you very much. Nick Ivey as well. Look, mate, the content that you put out and the big social media following that you've got, and the advice that you've given me, like, I really appreciate it as well. We were on the phone the other day having a chat about the podcast, and mate, you filled me with more confidence, and I think just reiterated that I sort of feel like, I'm on the right track, if that makes sense. And to be completely honest, like, I know we haven't hit thousands and thousands of views, and it hasn't been amazing, like absolutely ridiculously hectic, but I'm not expecting it to. I'm not expecting anything, to be honest. In terms of people listening or watching, what I'm really, because I know that that saying I'm nearly brought up in every podcast. Bad news travels around the world before good news gets out of bed, and if this is the good news, then it's going to be slow. It's going to be a slow burn, but I think it's really important, and you know, um, I'm enjoying it. I think that's the main part for me. And if I can help, other businesses and highlight their skills and their expertise, and give them a platform to come in and say hello, and we can talk about some stuff, then I'm all for that. And I want to continue doing the podcast. I've got I don't think the thought has crossed my mind to stop doing the podcast yet, which I think, is really good. And I hope that shows through the conversations I've been having with people. What I've learned. Well, I've learned a lot actually. Um, and a lot of it's been from the guests I've had in the podcast. Tom Henderson, he was a phenomenal guest early on in the piece, and I learned just to take a breath before each podcast. I still get very nervous before each one, sitting down with people. I know that the guests are nervous as well, and yeah, it's a nervous. I don't know. You're just anxious about what we're going to talk about. Some of these people I haven't had much to do with or had much conversation with, so there is that little bit of nerves there. But in every single podcast we've had so far, like after the first 5 minutes, we're into it, and it's almost like the cameras aren't there. But yeah, this is definitely foreign to me, and it's not something that I'm all that comfortable with. But yeah, the main stuff that I've learned is from the guests. I mean, seeing other people so passionate about what they do, uh, it really motivates me, and it doesn't reignite my passion. It just reinforces the passion that I've got for the construction industry. And I really do love the construction industry, and I love every bit about it. And I love that I love that it's so complex. I love that there's so many different individuals throughout the construction industry that, bring all different sorts of things to the table. I think that it's important to highlight the struggles that each guest is sort of trying to overcome, or they're tackling as well. And yeah, I think that, for people to understand a little bit more about construction, I feel like this podcast is important. I think that in the ACT, especially, like, where there's a lot of public service here, and I sometimes feel like the public service, this would be a good place for them to come on and I guess get a bit of an insight as to what it's like in the construction industry in the ACT. Noting like the Canberra's climate, we've got the coldest of winters and we get really warm summers here. So we've got, the extremes on both ends. And where that makes it interesting is everywhere, from working on site to uh, energy efficiency, and everything in between. So the design to actually constructing it, in the middle of winter, you go out 7 o'clock in the morning and pick up the steel you're going to use for that day. It's normally got water and frost all over it, and it's freezing cold. Then in summer, you pick that same steel up and it burns your hands. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to highlight all these different challenges. Um, about the industry, what I've learned, I think everyone's got the same sort of pain points. A lot of those are around approvals, which I have highlighted in the past quite extensively. I've got a few different guests lined up to talk about that specifically. I've been involved in, I've been talking with Chris Steele. I've been talking with a couple of different people in that approvals sort of space. I attended the PACAKERG, terrible acronym, PACAKERG meeting about industry reform and efficiency in construction. And that was really, I actually did a presentation there about approval delays and how that affects everything. And I put in, I think it was 9 requests for reform. So there's a lot of stuff happening there, and I feel like I'm trying to do the work. I'm trying to do the work outside of the podcast, I guess, to bring stuff back in and talk to people about that. And there's guests that I want to have come into the podcast to discuss those things extensively. The other things I've learned is that everyone's got a story to tell, and everyone's got a unique backstory. And look, I know that everyone does, but I feel like, an example of that be Sam Brax, started out with $400 and a ute and got into it. And, Sean Hardwick, he started his apprenticeship in plumbing at the start and doing bathrooms, and then he changed over. So everyone's got a unique story. And I feel like, if people listen to these stories, they might see the same sort of characteristics and go, well, he got through it, I can get through it, type of thing. And you'll notice on each podcast I talk about, and I think it's really important, to how do we attract more people to construction. And I think that's a really important Problem that needs solving. You hear it on the news all the time. Apprentice numbers are down. Apprentice numbers are down. But what are we actually doing about it? Is anyone discussing that as a topic and trying to go, well, why are they down? Yes, we need more people in construction, but why is it that not more people aren't going in construction? Are there barriers to entry there, and we need to work out a better process? So highlighting that consistently and the feedback we've been getting from people has been interesting. I think talking about a problem, you're there, halfway to solving it. So I'm going to continue doing that. Moving on to some of the challenges. Look, the main challenge for me and Rowan has has been on the technical side of things. I've never set up a podcast before, and I think Rowan's done a fair bit of videography, but we're not experts on the equipment. Well, the Rodecaster video in particular that we're using. We've had to jump over a number of different problems there. I feel like we've got it all sorted out now, which is a big relief. There's nothing worse than in a midway through a podcast, and some of the guests would understand this. We've got to stop because the cameras are flashing, or it's overheating, or there's this problem, or there's that problem. That's been the biggest challenge that we've had to navigate around so far. Booking people in to come into the podcast and organizing people to come in has not been a problem at all. It's just been the technical side, but I think that's all part of the process. And if I look at it, like, I feel like we're just sort of doing our little apprenticeship, or I'm learning a new trade in videography. And Rowan's been really helpful with all that sort of stuff, and he's been an absolute force on the other side of it. And Kurt as well. Kurt is our office guru on computers and anything spreadsheet related, and he's been able to jump in and give us a hand as well. So that's been good. And I think that everyone in the team, like in my businesses, they've been enjoying, I guess, it a little bit. We're meeting different people. I try and introduce everyone to the whole team before we come in and do a podcast. But yeah, back on the challenges. Every time I finish a podcast, I go home and I start to think when I'm in bed, I should have asked this, or I should have spoken about this, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. And it's been, yeah, I think that, I think that's been a good thing in terms of, I feel there's so much more I've got to learn about this, and so much more I've got to dive into. And I'm looking forward to where this is going to go. Look, jumping back to some of the other things that I've learned, I would say that after listening to myself speak in the first couple of podcasts, there was a lot of yeps. There was a lot of stuff that you're not really, I guess, supposed to do, because on the other side of things, it sounds terrible. Even the ums and ahs, and I still catch myself doing it, and I'm trying to mentally, outside of the podcast, remove those things from my vernacular. It's been great. Oh, and the ums. See, you just can't get away from them. Some of the other things I've learned. Ron, you got anything? What else have I learned?
I think before you were just letting the speaker speak with, like,
Yeah, learning how to speak in and be on the other side of things. I don't want this podcast to be about me. I know that I've bloody said, it's called Xav Builds. I know that it's my name behind it. I want this to be about the construction industry, and I just want to be a forum to discuss stuff in the construction industry, in the ACT. I want to put positivity in there. I want to discuss problems. I want to try and solve problems. I want to highlight things that we can do better. And I want to disagree with stuff and come up with alternate solutions. I don't want to be sitting here commentating and saying, no, negative, negative, negative. I want to be putting forward solutions, or helping people understand the construction industry, helping people in the construction industry with similar challenges. Talking to Carly from She Builds Homes was really interesting, and I guess getting to know her story and the challenges that she's faced as a woman in construction was really interesting. And I want to support bringing more women in construction and how we do that. And I think that's an important part as well. On the look, on the women in construction thing, my take is sort of this, and it's how do I put this? The way I would like to, we might have to cut a little bit of this bit out. The way I would like to the way I would like to describe it would be like, I don't care who's in construction, man or woman. Like, what I care about is the results on the other side of it. Can you do the job? Yes or no? That's all I really care about. So I would say, you know, what my take is on women in construction. If they can do the job, and they can, we'll get in and do the job. We need help in the construction industry. And I think the more people we can get involved, and I think that's one of the things that I did learn along the way with the podcast too, was that talking about inspiring the next generation to join the construction industry. I feel like I'm missing out on a little bit there on people that have been in an office job and they're in their late 20s or early 30s, and they're like, nah, this really isn't for me. There are pathways for you to come over to construction. There are mature age apprenticeships that you can take on, and a lot of the best apprentices that I've had have been mature age apprentices. So I sort of shifted that along the way as well to say, how can we attract more people to the construction industry? Because I don't think it is just young people. I think it is people that have that have potentially gone to uni and not enjoyed it. And then they've gone to work, in their degree, and they've gone, this really isn't for me. Like, you can easily switch over to the construction industry, get paid to learn. Yeah, your apprenticeship does take 3 years, but if you're working for the right people, your pay will reflect the effort you're putting in. And I think that's an important thing to talk about. What's been enjoyable about the podcast? Well, I can tell you this, every guest that I've had in and every conversation that I've had has been very enjoyable. Every time I've walked away from a podcast, I feel better and I have a smile on my face. And that's why I think that this podcast is important. And I think, I want to invite as many people as I can to come in to do the podcast. Look, we film the podcast generally on a Thursday in between 10 and 1:30. But I can do Tuesdays as well in about that same time. Look, late in the afternoons can be a little bit difficult. I try and avoid that. I am running businesses throughout the week and sort of over the weekend. So I want to be as sharp as I possibly can be. So doing it late in the afternoon I've done a few of them and I just felt like flat beforehand. So I'll try to avoid that if I can. But look, yeah, as I said, every guest has been enjoyable, and every single podcast I look back and think, how valuable that conversation was to me, and hopefully other people got value out of that conversation as well. Look, going back to the podcast with Tom Henderson, I feel like that was such a great podcast when I did it, and a lot of people resonated with that. I got a lot of text messages about the happiness program and meditation and, just Tom's story. And he's such an interesting guy and he does such great work. I'd love to have Tom come back on the podcast as well, but he was definitely a memorable guest. Nick Ivey as well. Look, every guest has been really memorable, but if I was to highlight one, it probably would be Tom. A lot of people that have texted me about listening to that podcast and have said how much they got out of it and how well Tom spoke as well. And I sort of knew that Tom was going to get that reaction, and I know that he shared it with a lot of his friends and family and stuff like that as well, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, there's probably been a moment with everyone on every podcast so far, and all the podcast guests so far have been very memorable. I really enjoyed talking with Mark Parton. He just went on a 7K run before he came in for the podcast and jumped in, and he was very thirsty, and gets very warm in the podcast room. But he's always great to talk to, Mr. Parton. And yeah, he's just a no nonsense guy, and I really appreciate his feedback. His point in that podcast was, you only live once, and get out there and have a crack. And I feel like that's 100% right. Like, and when I look back at the podcast now, and as I said, there's never been a time where I thought I wanted to stop, but I'm enjoying this, and do what you enjoy. It's been cool as well to build relationships with different people, and coming in and having a chat and getting to know that person. And like, it is a bit of an intimate experience. And a lot of people that have come in, well, the majority of the guests haven't done a podcast before. So, they're generally a bit nervous to start with. And then we get into talking and it's just all good. But yeah, it is a bit of an intimate experience. And I feel like I get to know people really quickly and really well. And the skill I guess I'm sort of taking out of it is learning where, the cues off people, where to ask more questions on a topic or to move on to another topic has been cool. Where is the podcast going? Well, put simply, and as I have sort of stated it already, I just want to keep talking to people, and I want to keep highlighting people that are doing amazing work in the ACT. There's a lot of builders I want to talk to. There's a lot of architects and designers I want to talk to, and there's a lot of people that I've actually written out a list of about 30 or 40 different people, and outside of that list, people have contacted me and sort of said, "Hey, would you mind if I came in and had a chat?" And I would invite you, if you're listening to this and you're sort of thinking, "Hey, I've got some stuff to add," and be cool to come in and have a chat. I'm not charging anyone any money for any of this. I'm not making any money out of this at all. I think to just be pouring money into it. But I feel like it's important, and I keep saying that because I do think it's important, and I want to give people a platform, I guess, to discuss how they're going and what they do to, one of the questions I often ask in the podcast is, how do you avoid burnout? And I think that's such a I think that's such an important topic in construction, because sometimes we get so wrapped up in the project and what's happening next, what's coming up, that we forget to look after ourselves. I know that I do that, and I've got to sort of check myself when I'm feeling tired or when I'm feeling stressed out. I need to go, "Whoa, I need to go and hit some golf balls, or I need to go for a walk, or I need to, spend some time out in the yard mowing the lawn, doing the stuff that, I guess switches my brain off and makes me think less." But getting back to the point, where's this going? Well, yeah, look, I want to help. I want to help. I want to help people through them listening to this podcast and sort of seeing similar struggles or challenges that they might be having in their business or in their trade, or young apprentices that are thinking, "Oh, maybe this isn't for me," and not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, my big vision is to have multiple people come in and discuss, reforms that the government looking at bringing in, or discuss, projects that have gone well, or discuss, difficult things that they might be trying to maneuver around. Um, Ideas for new segments, questions, or formats that I want to test out. That's one of the questions I've written down here. Look, I'm guided by. I mean, what do people want to listen to? What can help what can help the industry more? I know Dan Cusack. He was a really good person to have in for the podcast, and spoke really well. And he had some really cool takes on. We discussed in there whether landscapers needed licenses, and I'm maybe thinking now that maybe they do need licenses. So I'm still on the fence about that. And one of the people that Dan spoke about in the podcast, Dom Galloway. I actually had him come in. We sat down in here for half an hour, or for an hour actually, and just spoke about landscaping and where it was at as an industry, and what was happening in the ACT, and what was going well, and what I think what needs to be done better. So, you know, I think he'd be a good guest. I think he was a little bit worried that people, he'd waffle on a little bit too much and wouldn't be interesting. But as I sort of said to him, that everyone's got a unique story to tell, and everyone's got their own, I guess, opinion on where they think the industry is at and what we can be doing better. So, you know, I do want to get Dom in for a long conversation, and maybe I get him in uh, with Dan, and we have the three of us chatting about landscaping and where landscaping is at. Getting back to the bigger vision of the podcast, yeah, I mean, I just want to see where it goes for the moment. I just want to keep enjoying talking to people, and if anything, yeah, that main thing of giving people a platform. Like after the podcast is shot, Rowan and I will clip up the podcast, and we'll get a whole heap of clips out of that, and I'd usually put those onto Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube Shorts, and try and tag the people in it, just to get some awareness out there. And some of the things we're discussing are really interesting and maybe relevant to relevant to you in construction in the ACT. Or if you're not sure about something, say for example, if a client is thinking about, using you for a job they've got coming up, it'd be cool to see a client jump on YouTube and actually listen to the podcast and get to know, the guests a little bit more. And I feel like that could be a useful thing for a client that's possibly not sure, that maybe want to know more about you and I guess personally find out about, what's this person like, in a day to day sort of setting, and what do they tell, how do they think? And I think the podcast gives people a good platform to demonstrate the way that, the values and the standards that they keep. So that's probably another part of it. So if you made it this far along the video, what I would love for you to do is give me some suggestions or some feedback. What can I do better? What questions should I be asking? And what kind of topics do you want me to cover? Specifically with each guest. You'll notice that I've got the quick fire round in most of the podcast. Now it's never a quick fire round. It's just the same sort of set of questions that I ask everyone, because I think they're important. If there's a question you think I'm missing that'd be good, please let me know, and please drop a comment or let me, add something somewhere, or send me a text message or an email. I want to be better at this. I want to add more value. So, if you feel like there's someone I should be talking to, or someone I should get in contact with to add, to bring into the podcast to have a chat with, definitely reach out to me and say, speak to this person. Someone mentioned I should talk to Thor's Hammer. So I sent Thor an email, and, he's very keen to come in for a chat, and we're looking at lining that up soon. Yeah, and there's been a lot of people like that have sort of just reached out and said, hey, I've got something to say, what can we do? And, the same with guests that have come on. I think 3 or 4 people have have given a shout out to Details by Ned, and I've been talking with Details by Ned, and we're looking to catch up soon for a podcast. So that should be really fun. How can you get involved? Well, send me a message on Instagram. That's probably the easiest one. You can send me an email. My email is xav@xavbuilds.au. Get in touch with me there. Any socials, just send it a message or put a comment in there, and I'll get in touch with you, and we can have a chat. What else? I do really want to talk to Chris Steele in this podcast. I feel like that would be a really, really cool thing to do, being that he is, I guess, head of construction in the ACT. I want to invite him in because I feel like not a lot of people know that much about Chris. And he's a really nice guy. He's a very smart guy, and he's very articulate. And I think that I think he gets some value out of, coming in and having a discussion. I don't want the podcast to be a super duper formal type thing. So one of the things I'm going to can is the intros that I do for guests, because I stuff every one of them up and I bumble over the intro that I've written. So I'm trashing that. I want it to be a little bit more informal, and I want it to be a little bit more me. And I don't think sitting there reading off a piece of paper for the first, 30 seconds is that good. So that's being trash. So if you're going to give me feedback on that, I've already watched a few. I've watched my podcast back, and I've thought that's trash. Let's get rid of that. Other really cool people that I want to come and have a chat with, Anna from the NBA. I've spoken with Anna, and she's keen to come in, but I just need to line that up with her and have a chat. It's the 100 years for the Master Builders Association this year, so it'd be really cool to chat with her about where the NBA is at, where it's been, where it's going, and get her take on the industry in the ACT at the moment. I want to get Greg Weller back as well from the HIA. They're 80 years. He was the first podcast guest that I've had. So definitely got to get Greg back. He's a guy that loves to talk, and the trick with Greg is, jumping in when because he loves it. And he's got so much to say, and he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's been a big support for me as well. So yeah, look, big thanks to Greg there. I definitely haven't. I'm sure I haven't. Next podcast that's coming out is with Mick Spencer. it's going to be look, if I get this video up beforehand, then I do. If I don't, it'll be out on Tuesday. I'm filming this on Friday, the 4th of July. And yeah, the conversation with Vic was really cool. Like he's a dude that just loves business and absolutely, he's all about business. And I love that. Because being in construction, I think that again, we get caught up in running the job, and we get caught up working with our hands, and we get caught up with the project. And sometimes we forget that we have to run a business as well. And running a business is a multifaceted type of operation. You've got to be across everything. So there is a challenge there, and it was really beneficial to have him in for a bit of a chat. And yeah, that one's coming out this Tuesday. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah. In closing, look, thank you everyone again for tuning in and listening to the podcast so far. I really appreciate the support. I really appreciate every message that I've got, every comment, every like on all the videos. Thank you to all the guests again. I'm sure that I've not missed anyone. Bill from WorkSafe. Oh, Bill was great. That was an interesting one as well, the podcast with Bill and WorkSafe specifically. Dealing with government like that, Bill had a few parameters to work within, and it was interesting for me to, I guess, have to navigate around those things as well. But I feel like, highlighting safety in construction, and it's a big part of construction. I think that that was really important to do, and I'm looking forward to, catching up with WorkSafe, again in the future at some stage, and getting a take on where the industry is at there too. But getting back to in closing, I was thanking everyone, wasn't I? Still thanking everyone. Look, what's coming up next? Look, Ashley Berry from the Property Council. She will be, she's coming up next, and I think that's going to be a cracking podcast. I really want to get into building approvals and delays. Back to the roots of the rally for construction. Yeah, I think that one's going to be a juicy one, and I really want to talk about the housing crisis with Ashley, and get into that, and let's diagnose the symptoms, and let's come up with some solutions. Ashley actually attended the Packer meeting as well, and she jumped in a lot and had a lot to say. So I'm sure she's got a lot to bring to the podcast as well. What other guests have I been talking to? I've been talking to a lot of people. I've got a plumber lined up to talk. I've got another landscaper, smaller type operation. He's going to come in, and there's some other landscapers, and there's some other chippies that I want to talk to. Fiddy, Hardwood Projects, been chatting with him. Got to line that up. Just really good operators. If you think you're an expert in your field, and you think that you are a gun, and you're doing well, or come in and tell me your story. Let's talk about it. So we're on the way to 20 episodes, and the journey has been amazing so far, and fun and enjoyable, and I'm loving it. Let's finish it off there. But I want to finish on a good quote. Marcus Aurelius. I really love Marcus Aurelius. He's always got some good quotes. Let's cut it. I want to get a good one. Out of the top 10, the number one quote from Marcus Aurelius is the following: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." How good's that? And I want to finish the podcast with that quote. Oh, I want to finish this wrap up with that quote. Nah, I got to start that again. I'll finish it off with a quote, and it's from Marcus Aurelius. It's his number one, actually. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And yeah, I'll finish it off there. But look, stay tuned. If you haven't liked, subscribed, please like and subscribe. jump over to YouTube to watch the podcast in full. Give me a like, give me a subscribe over there. Be greatly appreciated. And yeah, if you're keen to come and have a chat, get in touch. Thank you very much for your time, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.